How can you quickly establish your leadership credentials? Is there sort of a shortcut to being seen as a leader, or at least to get the chance to lead? And if there is, what exactly is involved in taking that shortcut? About 10 years ago, maybe a little more, Sitkin and I decided that we would put together a model for teaching leadership here at Duke. The challenge was to make it both a model that people could understand and that they could use to work through their day-to-day leadership challenges, and to make it scientifically valid, to make it something that reflected the very best science of the day. The model we came up with is called the 6 domains model of leadership, and the 6 domains it refers to address 6 different categories of things that leaders need to do in the leader-follower relationship. I want to talk about the research that we did looking at specific aspects of personal leadership and specific aspects of relational leadership that help leaders establish their leadership traction, as it were, that get them started as leaders. It makes sense that we would have leaders because they're a very effective and fundamental way for us to organize our behavior. If we're all sort of wandering around as individuals, not much gets done. If there's someone there to say, hey, let's do it this way, and if we're willing to follow that person, then as a team, as an organization, as a group, we're much more effective. All of our efforts go in the same direction, and we accomplish a lot more. There's what Sim and I termed the follower's dilemma, which is, yes, I want to work together with people. Yes, I want to follow the leader if that leader's going to take me somewhere that's good for the team. But I don't want to be exploited. I don't want to follow a leader who's just going to use me for his or her own advantage and then sort of cast me aside. If human beings are good at resolving this follower's dilemma, then there must be signs they look for that tell them whether a particular leader is going to exploit them or not, that tell them whether they can believe in and trust a leader. The research in the fairness area had demonstrated that this happens very quickly. It can happen in a matter of minutes. If some sign comes forward that this person is going to treat you fairly, and the sign might be that they're even-handed, the sign might be that they treat you with respect, that they give you personhood in a sense. If one of these signs comes up, people will jump to the conclusion, this is someone I can trust, and they'll follow that person. Sim and I wondered if similar things happened in leadership, and happened not just with fairness, but with other characteristics of leadership, other leadership actions. So working with Annick, Jansen, and Levy, we decided to look at some data that we had collected all around the world using a 360-degree survey. Sim and I thought, well, we could look at the direct report ratings that we had accumulated over a number of years and see if there were certain connections that seemed to happen almost automatically. What we could look for was some sign that if I thought leader X had characteristic Y, then I'd be more willing to follow that leader, and I'd be willing to follow that leader almost off the bat. The research showed that there were 3 heuristics, we call them. Heuristic is a scientific name for a shortcut. So one of the leadership heuristics was fairness, same as I identified in my research previously. Remember, fairness isn't just fair pay, it's fair treatment. And it turns a lot on the feeling that one is being granted due respect and that the leader has concern for what you're supplying to the organization and for your needs. The example that I think of when I think of fairness as a leadership characteristic that I think most of us can identify with is Nelson Mandela, the great South African leader. Mandela was quite remarkable both before and after he took over the presidency in South Africa. Remember, his background was that he was imprisoned for years and years by the apartheid government, the segregationist government of South Africa. And one of the remarkable things about Mandela was, even as he was being sentenced to imprisonment, he said, I'm not here just for the Africans, and I'm not here just for the whites. What I believe South Africa needs is fair treatment for both races. It's great to say that sort of thing, but the interesting thing about Mandela is that he followed it up with action. Mandela's sent off to prison, and the first thing he does is to begin studying the language and culture of the Afrikaans people. These are his jailers. These are the most racist of the whites in South Africa. And Mandela says, how can I connect with these people if I don't understand them, if I can't speak their language? It's a great quote from Mandela, which I may not get correct, but I remember the essence of it. Mandela said, if you want to change a person's mind, speak to him in a language that you both speak. If you want to change his heart, speak to him in his language. And so by learning the language of his jailers, he began forging a reputation for respect across ethnic and racial lines, and he began to be seen as the fair leader. Comes the end of apartheid, comes the time for black rule to begin in South Africa, and there was no question who would take over. There was no question but that it would be Mandela, because only Mandela was seen as fair by both sides. The second leadership heuristic that we found in our research is leader self-sacrifice. That's the term of art we use. And let me be real clear about what exactly is meant. It's not that the leader has to become a martyr to the cause. It's simply that a leader has to make it abundantly clear that his or her fortunes are joined to the fortunes of the team, to the fortunes of the organization. That there is no attempt to gain at the expense of those you're leading. When I think of an example of a leader who established his leadership by making it abundantly clear he wasn't in it for personal gain, I think of Mohandas Gandhi, the leader of India during its revolution. Gandhi faced this situation. He's a high caste, he's a rich Indian, educated in London, a lawyer, highly educated man. He's coming back to a nation that's largely impoverished, that's used to rich people taking advantage of poor people, and he has to somehow galvanize the whole population of India behind his movement. So what does he do? He gives it all up. He lives on an ashram, he spins his own cotton, he dresses as simply as the simplest peasant, he eats nothing grand, very, very meager sort of vegetarian meals. He's the picture of India. He becomes the picture of India. And in making that sacrifice and giving up all of the entitlements he was born to and educated to, he makes it abundantly clear that all he cares about is India. All he cares about is leading his people forward. I think when I think about a single act that was the ultimate leadership heuristic, it's Gandhi giving up all of that and suddenly being there for the hundreds of millions of people that were in India and who really didn't have a leader they could identify with. It's not that he's willing to do anything for India. He's quite deliberate in how he uses the leadership, but he's smart in terms of how to connect to all these people. I actually use Gandhi as an example quite often when I talk to people about how do you lead virtually, or how do you lead people who are very different from you, where you can't establish a personal connection. Well, do something that shows an immediate dedication to them, and they'll give you their followership back. The third heuristic that came up in our research is shared values. So people will see you as a leader almost automatically if you're fair to them. People will see you as a leader almost automatically if you show that you are deliberately linking your outcomes to theirs. And they will see you as a leader almost automatically if they believe you value the same things they do. If you believe that if they believe that there's a body of shared experience that you and they share. Example of this sort of leadership heuristic that comes to mind is some years back, quite a few years back now, given how old I am, I had the opportunity to ask some questions of an executive named Gordon Bethune, who was then the CEO of Continental Airlines. Bethune had come up through the ranks in the Boeing Corporation, which of course supplied a lot of airplanes to Continental, and at a time when Continental was in real trouble, Bethune had taken over as CEO to try and turn the airline around. He was quite successful at this. Bethune knew how to fly an airplane, so when he talked to the pilots union, he could talk to them about what it was like to fly a 737 or a 747. He knew what had gone into the building of the airplane. He demonstrated the value that he placed on what he was asking people to do in an interesting way. And I'll tell you that little story. Continental was in bad shape. Bethune's turning it around, and so Gordon Bethune says to his marketing people, "How can we make the airline look different?" Well, they came up with a new logo, a new color scheme for the corporate offices and the reservation desks and the airplanes. So to make it clear to the public that this was going to be a new Continental Airlines, they needed to repaint all the airplanes. Now, if you have a $100 million jetliner, you don't take it out of service during the day when it could be earning money to pay itself off. You take it out of service overnight, and you paint it overnight so that it's ready to roll at some point the next day. That meant that Bethune had to ask all of the mechanics to put in extra shifts, overnight shifts, in order to repaint the airplanes, which to the typical mechanic might have seemed like a pretty silly way to waste a night. Bethune, to his credit, realized that he needed to demonstrate his dedication to these new values, his dedication to the change, his shared value. And to do that, he went down to Midway Field, where they were painting a lot of Continental jets. Late one night, he walks into the crew chief of the mechanics. He says, "Give me some dungarees and a can of paint and tell me what to do. I'm not here as the CEO, I'm just here to help paint airplanes." It wasn't just a photo op. He stayed the whole night, painted airplanes the whole night long, and showed his dedication, his shared value in the change that he was asking them to make. End of story is, Bethune enjoyed tremendous support from the mechanics union throughout his tenure at Continental. When he left Continental, they bought him a Harley motorcycle as a parting gift, just again illustrating the strength of the connection that he had forged there. Now, the research shows that if you engage in any one of these heuristics early on, it's as though people have receptors out. They have their fairness receptor out, they have their shared value receptor out, they have their dedication, their self-sacrifice receptor out, and they're ready to receive that information, positive or negative. So if you're in a new leadership situation, look to performing some action that demonstrates these things, and be extremely careful about any hint of an action that denies any of these things. So you come on board a new place, you bring some of your deputies with you, there's going to be instant suspicion about your fairness. You have to make an effort to show you're going to be even-handed with the existing employees as with the people you bring in. You come into a new job, got a nice new office. Maybe the best thing in the world is not to get the office redecorated until you do something for the organization. You come into a new job with new people, and they're going to be wondering, does this person share my values? So a good way to establish leadership is to look for some common value and work on it, make it obvious that you share that value with the people you're going to lead. Our research shows that if you do that, your leadership capital goes way up, and you can then draw on that reservoir as you lead people through the changes you might have to mandate or through the crises you might have to face. In my view, it's good starting policy to activate at least one of these heuristics.